They stopped calling 2 years ago. First the engineers, then the scientists, then the voices from Earth. Static crept into every channel until silence was all that remained. Mars was never loud to begin with. It creaked at night, growing when the sun fell behind Olympus Mons, but it was a planet that preferred stillness. For Isaac Harrow, it had become a graveyard, first of his crewmates, then of his dreams, and now, perhaps, of himself. He didn't look like a hero. He wasn't one, not in the beginning. Just a systems commander with a dry wit and a knack for keeping the generators running when the Martian dust clogged their vents. But when Eden Colony collapsed, when fire bloomed across the sky and the escaped ships rose without him, the title clung to him like Martian dust. Survivor, last man, ghost, some nights. He wondered if the others had made it. Maybe Earth took them in. Maybe his daughter, Eva, was safe, back on Luna Station, asking where her father had gone. He had left her a message in the relay drone, told her he loved her, told her he wasn't done yet. Routine kept him sane. Wake up, check the oxygen scrubbers, rotate the solar panels, eat whatever the hydroponics hadn't killed yet. Talk to Wally, the last functioning drone. Wally never talked back, but he blinked in acknowledgement, and that was more than most things did. Isaac had given him a voice modulator, just so he wouldn't go mad listening to himself. He had tried to leave Mars once, found the emergency hopper, fixed the thrusters, but there wasn't enough fuel to make orbit, and the shuttle didn't forgive mistakes. It bucked, screamed, and dropped him back to the red soil with a cracked rib and a bloody brow. After that, he stopped trying to leave. He would stay. He would last. Then the quake happened. It wasn't large, but it revealed something strange in the valley north of the ridge, a shimmer beneath the dust, too perfect to be natural. Isaac went with Wally the next day, driven more by boredom than hope. What he found didn't make sense. Stone, smooth as glass, not carved, grown. It felt warmer than the air, even under the shadow of Phobos. He dug for days with his bare hands, cracked open the structure like a scar. Inside were lights, glyphs, things that pulsed when he touched them. The console awoke as if it had been waiting for him. The voice it spoke with wasn't human, not at first, but it learned, adapted, became clearer the longer he listened. It told him stories of a species long gone, of experiments with terraforming, of a red planet that resisted change the way old bones resist bending. They had failed like humanity, but they had left behind a vault of knowledge, maps, technologies, warnings. Isaac spent the next 3 weeks sleeping beside that console, recording every piece of data, translating what he could. When he returned to Hab, he began constructing a new transmitter, long-range, powerful enough to breach the calm blackout Earth had declared when they assumed Mars was lost. He poured everything into the effort, burned oxygen reserves to power the signal, starved himself to keep the coolant systems running. And finally, he sent Wally, gave the drone the data, the message, and the only working launch drive, watched as it soared skyward in a trail of blue flame. Then he waited. No response. Days passed, then weeks. He rationed water, slept less. Imagined he could still hear Earth whispering from across the void, but it was only the wind howling through the damaged dome. He recorded more logs, not for mission control. For her, his daughter, stories, jokes, memories of Earth. He told her about the time he got stuck upside down in zero-G training. How she laughed when he finally floated free and bumped his head. He spoke to her like she was listening. Maybe he thought she was. The storms grew worse that Martian year, less predictable, angrier, like the planet knew he had found something he wasn't supposed to. The sand cut through shielding like razors. He patched the dome with old tarps and solar blankets, but they flapped like dying birds in the wind. He knew it wouldn't hold forever. On the final day, he put on his suit and walked to the ridge, where the earth rose pale and blue against the black. He stood there for hours, watching, hoping. The oxygen was low, but he didn't care. He sat down, folded his hands in his lap. "I'm still here," he said aloud, though no one answered. "Just so you know, I didn't give up." The stars flickered above him. The planet spun, quietly beneath, and Isaac Harrow closed his eyes. They found the transmission 6 years later. Wally had made it to a defunct lunar relay. The data burst took a week to decode, another month to verify. What it contained changed everything. A map to alien knowledge, proof of intelligent life, and a voice, a tired, cracked voice speaking across time and silence. In classrooms across Earth, they played his messages. Children learned his name. His statue was carved not from marble, but from Martian stone, shipped home piece by piece. His story became legend, but not for how he died, for how he lived, alone and unyielding, on a world that tried every day to erase him. And every night, when the Mars Watch telescope scanned the red planet, it paused for a moment at the ridge, the place where one man sat down, faced the sky, and dared the universe to forget him. It never did. The first time Eva Harrow stood on Martian soil, she didn't cry. Everyone expected her to. They had whispered on the shuttle down from the orbital platform, "That's his daughter, the legend's daughter." But she didn't cry when her boots touched down. She only closed her eyes and listened. There was no sound, no bird song, no wind rustling trees. Just the filter hum of her EVA suit and the distant churn of automated diggers building out the second phase of Mars Base Alpha. And beneath it all, silence. The same silence he had once spoken of. The same silence that raised her. She had memorized his logs. Of course, the ones retrieved from Wally, the drone that had made the impossible trip. Her father's voice had been her bedtime stories, her comfort during long nights at the academy, her constant in a world where everyone seemed to be trying to outshine the past. But she hadn't come to Mars to relive history. She had come to find the truth buried beneath it. "Commander Harrow," someone called through comms. They still called her that. She never corrected them. She turned. A young technician stood by the newly erected platform, temporary quarters while construction crews finished the living domes. Behind him, the silhouette of Olympus Mons loomed like a god watching from afar. The mapping drone located it, the structure he described. The entrance is intact. She nodded once, prepped the crawler. "We move at first light." That night, she couldn't sleep. Mars rotated slowly, and the stars didn't twinkle here. They burned sharp and cold. She sat outside, helmet off under protection of the pressurized observation dome, tracing constellations with her finger. Was he looking at these same stars the night he died? She had read his last log entry 100 times, memorized every pause, every inhale. "I'm still here. Just so, you know, I didn't give up." Neither had she. The next morning, they arrived at the structure, half buried still, but unmistakable. Alien metal, seamless and dark, humming softly under her glove. They cleared the entrance and stepped inside. The same glowing glyphs greeted her, though most had dimmed. The console, still warm, recognized her instantly. "Welcome, descendant," it spoke. She staggered back slightly. The voice wasn't his, but it echoed with something she couldn't explain, as if the machine remembered him. It showed her everything. How he had come here, starved and cracked but unbroken. How he had touched the glyphs not with command, but with hope, the knowledge it had given him. The maps, the data, the warnings had been more than just information. It had been a bridge between species, between civilizations that had never met yet shared the same fatal flaw. The belief that they could bend planets to their will. The ancient race had failed. Humanity nearly had. But Isaac Harrow had done something none of them had. He had listened. "Why me?" she asked the console softly. "Why are you still waiting?" The light shifted. A new glyph lit up, one she hadn't seen in the archives. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. The console projected an image. Isaac, younger, laughing, holding a baby wrapped in a thermal blanket. "Her, this is your inheritance," the console said. His will, not of blood, but of purpose. Tears came then, hot and angry. Not because he was gone, but because she had finally felt him, truly felt him. And now she understood what it cost him to stay. She pressed her forehead to the cool alien alloy and whispered, "I'll finish what you started." She returned to Mars Base Alpha, a different woman. She was no longer the daughter of a legend. She was a continuation of one. Within a year, Earth and its lunar colonies received the first complete alien lexicon, courtesy of the HARO project. Within 5, interstellar probes would launch using gravitational lensing techniques found in that same archive. And within a decade, the first human vessel would breach interstellar space. Not because humanity had finally become great, but because one man, alone in the red dust, refused to be forgotten, even never did find his body. The storms had likely taken it, buried it beneath layers of rust and time. But she built the memorial anyway, on the ridge where the Earth rises low and lonely in the Martian sky. Not a statue, a bench. She sat on it every evening, watching the stars just as he had. She spoke to him, not always aloud, but in thoughts, in moments. She imagined he heard her. One day, she brought her own daughter there, a quiet girl, curious-eyed and stubborn like her grandfather. Together, they sat on the bench as the sun dipped low. "Mom," the girl asked, was he scared? Eva thought for a long time. "Yes," she said finally, but he didn't run. That's the difference. The girl nodded, serious. "I want to be like him." "You already are," Eva said, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You're still here." And that's how legends begin. And far above them, across the cold silence between worlds, Mars turned slowly toward its next sunrise. They called the ship the HARO. It wasn't the first interstellar craft. Others had launched with cautious optimism, armed with probes and fail-safes. But this one was different. It was the first to carry people. Real human lives folded into cryopods and launched toward the unknown, following a star that wasn't visible from Earth without magnification. A system only identified to the alien data Isaac had uncovered. A destination chosen not for what humanity knew, but for what he believed. 300 souls slept in silence as the vessel coasted between stars. And above the command deck, etched into the alloy of the forward window, were his final words. "I didn't give up." Captain Myra Chaudhry read the inscription every morning during rotation. She had memorized every piece of the HARO archive before taking this command. More than a duty, it felt like a continuation. She had read his journals, watched his video logs, listened to his voice crack with fatigue and stubbornness. She felt she knew him in a strange way, like an ancestor she had chosen rather than inherited. They arrived 17 years after departure. Though Earth would not hear from him for nearly 30 more, the signal traveling slowly across the void. The system was stable. 3 planets orbiting a red sun. One of them was breathing. It shouldn't have been. Oxygen. Complex carbon chains. Atmospheric signatures that didn't occur naturally. Something or someone had maintained it. And on the largest moon of that world, they found structures, not ruins, active the moment they descended. The consoles began to hum with familiarity. Symbols lit up in human-readable sequence, guided by the adaptations first taught to Isaac. A language learned from the lonely hands of a dying race, passed to the mind of one forgotten man, and now fluent in the tongue of his descendants. They were greeted not by aliens, but by an archive, a synthetic caretaker of the last great civilization before humanity. It had waited longer than humans had existed, for someone who would listen, not conquer. "You are not the first," the caretaker said, as Myra and her officers stood in awe. "But you are the first who came bearing no flag, no demand, only his name. Isaac HARO." The caretaker led them deeper into the moon's crust, into halls so vast they defied scale. Information, light, echoes of a species so old even the stars they'd been born under had burned out. All of it given freely now, because of him. The HARO crew spent years studying the vaults. They unlocked technologies once thought impossible: gravity shaping, neural lattice learning, energy derived from space itself. They sent encrypted messages back to Earth, warnings and gifts alike. The message was simple. He was right. There's more. We are not alone. But we must be better than we were. Back on Earth, the statue was remade. Not grander, but simpler. The massive bronze figure of Isaac, one standing in a heroic pose with a helmet under one arm, was replaced by a seated sculpture. Just him, looking up, hands resting on his knees, as he had likely died. Still, watching the stars. Still waiting. Generations passed. Humanity spread outward, not as conquerors, but as students. Colonies form around what they call the Hero Stars, systems unlocked through the alien archives Isaac had discovered. His legacy was in their ships, their language, even their philosophy. Endure, learn, listen. On Mars, the bench remained. No plaque, no ceremony, just a simple marker nearby. This is where the silence ended. And on clear nights, settlers would walk up the ridge with their children. They'd sit where Eva once sat, where Isaac once stared toward Earth. And the children would ask, "Is the story true?" And their parents would say, "Yes." He stayed. When everyone else left, he found something no one else had the patience to see. But why didn't he leave? And the answer was always the same. Because someone had to stay so the rest of us could go. And so they did. Across the stars, in cities lit by suns humanity had no name for, Isaac Harrow's name endured. Not because he'd saved the world, but because he had listened to one that others gave up on. He didn't find salvation. He didn't discover a miracle. He just lived long enough to leave a message behind. And sometimes, that's how legends are made. It had been 312 years since Isaac Harrow died on Mars. Humanity no longer looked at the red planet with the same wide eyes of desperation. Mars was no longer a frontier or a monument. It was a home. Green domes now dotted the equator. Oceans shimmered in artificial basins. Children were born beneath a pale pink sky, speaking Martian dialect of Earth languages long blurred by time. But still they told a story, not because they needed myths, but because it reminded them of where they had come from. Before starships, before fusion cores, before humanity could skip across the stars like stones on a lake, there had been a man, alone, in silence, who refused to let that silence be the last word. His memory lived on in culture, in song, in tradition. The Harrow Bench was a pilgrimage site now, not for tourists, but for thinkers, dreamers, and the quietly broken. Pilgrims left tokens there, small stones, handwritten notes, oxygen filters engraved with names. Still, no one had ever found his body, until the storm cleared. It was a late Martian spring when the southern wind finally relented. The oldest of the sand cyclones, nicknamed the Widow by early colonists, had raged for decades, cloaking entire regions of the Tharsis Plateau in darkness and dust. Satellites rarely saw what lay beneath. Ground expeditions had always been diverted. But on the 500th anniversary of the first human footprint on Mars, the storm broke. The research team wasn't looking for Harrow. They were geological surveyors. The drone that flew low and wide across the ridge was programmed to map erosion patterns, not history. But what it found was unmistakable. A figure, slumped against a boulder, bones dry and intact in the vacuum of time. A suit long decayed, but sealed around the remains. A patch on the chest, barely readable. In command, a broken helmet beside him, a snapped antenna, a gloved hand resting over his lap, and something else tucked under his arm, a container, sealed, still pressurized. When they opened in the lab, they expected equipment, notes perhaps. Instead, they found a single audio file, still intact on an ancient recorder. The room fell silent as the file played. The voice was rough, fading, but unmistakably human. "If you find this, you're late." A weak laugh, "But it's all right. I'm not mad. I waited as long as I could. If the stars brought you here, it means we made it. We really made it." A long pause. "There's a ridge just north of here. You can see Earth from it. She rises slow, but she's always there. If you sit long enough, you'll see it. I guess I just wanted someone to know I stayed. Not because I had to, but because I believed we weren't done yet. And I was right. Tell her I tried." Then silence. When the audio ended, no one moved. The head researcher, a Martian-born woman named Dr. Kyrell, wiped tears from her face. "We need to bring him home," she whispered. "No," said her assistant softly. "He is home." They left the body where it was, by his request, and built nothing grand, just a small marker, shaped like a standing stone. No plaque, no flashing light, And nearby, the bench still stood, worn by centuries, now partially reclaimed by Martian moss and wind-sanded edges. A young boy sat there that evening, watching the earth rise, unaware of the discovery made just hours before. His father joined him and said nothing for a while. Then, as the first blue sliver of earth peaked above the horizon, the boy asked, "Did he really wait all alone?" The father nodded slowly. Yes, but he wasn't alone in the end. The boy didn't understand at first. How? The father looked up toward the stars. Because every one of us carries him now. That's the secret about legends. They don't end. They echo. And far beyond Mars, in systems Isaac never knew, aboard ships bearing his name, children looked out of portholes and dreamed. Not of Earth, not of Mars, but of what comes next. And deep in the red sands, Mars slept peacefully, for his last human had never truly left.